Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 9:35 here, 9:35 p.m. Calgary, Alberta time, Friday, December 17th. I'm happy to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is up to us. 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. Glad to be here. Sorry I'm a little bit late. Just getting in and getting my chat room open here and everything. And glad to be able to do the shows. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I don't know how many shows I've done now, almost 500 shows, and have almost 17,000 shows listened to. So somebody's listening. Thank you very much for being here and being a part of this. I really appreciate it. Been doing Blog Talk for a little bit over a year, and wasn't sure how long I'd be doing it or how long people would be interested in listening. So thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it and appreciate your support. It's just awesome. So tonight, I'm glad to be here. I want to get right back into the article that we left off on Wednesday night. I can't believe how busy this week has been. It's just day after day, just go, go, go. We'll just pick up right where we left off. It's the Canadian Resource Centre for Victims of Crime. And I'm going to pop the link into the chat room here in a minute when I bring up the chat room. Chat room's just coming up right now. And this particular website's got some great information on it. And last week we left, well, actually Wednesday, not last week, but earlier this week, we left off on a section called about myths about child abuse, right? Because this particular article is called What is Child Abuse? How to Help the Victims. So this is Canadian Resource Centre for Victims of Crime, crcvc.ca, and there's under the resource tab, there is a link there, and it's called What is Child Abuse? And Child Abuse, How to Help Victims. So it's a great PDF. It's a PDF download. There's about 26 pages to it. And we're just looking at some of the myths, and that's what I wanted to look at tonight, just to continue on with this. It's some good information. And it's Canadian, but it doesn't matter because it's sort of, it's just good info for everybody. And it's I don't know, I find this PDF quite good. So well, you can go check this out too as well, and I'll be sure and pop the link into there to the actual website. So yeah, I just got done with the Dreamcatchers Talk radio show, and I was running it just a little bit late there, so sorry about that. And but we'll get right into this article. So I'm not a counselor or therapist. I don't hold any certificates in those areas. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows, and I just really, believe that all of our voices are important, right? We all have to speak up. I just wanted to be one more voice, right, just to speak out against child abuse, to stand up for child rights. And this was very important to me because I'm a survivor. And so I'm a survivor of all the different types of child abuse, which is really sad and pathetic, but it's true. And no child should be abused ever. And so, it's important to me to be a voice and to be able to do this, to speak out, against child abuse, because so much of society just thinks it's okay and that it's no problem to abuse a child. And, children are not here and put on this earth to be abused, and they're not sex toys, they're not punching bags, they're not put here for people and parents and other people to psychologically and emotionally, verbally abuse. They're not put here to neglect. Children are precious, and they're just little people, but they need support. They need care. They need nurturing. They need their needs met. You know what I mean? And so I hope everybody will be a voice for the kids. You know what I mean? Just raise your voice, get involved, whatever way you can. It doesn't matter what you decide to do as long as you get proactive and get involved somewhere, hopefully locally, in your local area, and as well as nationally. I mean, I say why not, and internationally. May as well just get involved because these kids need our help. And so this website, this is the CRCVC, the Canadian Resource Centre for Victims of Crime. And we're going to look at facts and myths. I think we actually started this Wednesday night looking at the facts and myths surrounding child abuse, right? And we actually went over a couple of them. And I want to start right here where we sort of left off. Myth, there's a myth that says that child abuse is a rare occurrence. And this particular article was, they didn't give a first name. They just gave a last name. They said this article was written by Hillingworth, Hillingworth. So I don't know exactly the full name of this person, right? But whoever wrote this particular PDF's name was Hillingworth, and I couldn't find a full name on it. But that's who wrote the article, and I'm just reading right from it. So facts and myths. Child abuse is a rare occurrence. That's the myth. The fact is that statistics indicate that child abuse and neglect occur frequently in Canada. And of course, they're focusing on Canada because this is a Canadian website. That's why. But child abuse and neglect occur frequently all over the world, not just in Canada, not just the United States. We're talking everywhere, right? It's horrible. Myth, here's another one. Abused and neglected children almost always come from poor minority and or inner city families. This is what some people might believe, that abused and neglected children almost always come from poor minority and or inner city families. And the facts are there is no evidence that links socioeconomic status, race, or educational level to abuse and neglect. Child abuse can occur within any neighborhood and school community across the country. So yeah, it doesn't matter what, how rich or poor, a person is, how much education they have, what type of, career they have. A lot of people think, most people who abuse their children are just, ignorant, poor people who have no money, and it's just not true. People in high society, people abuse their children. Doctors abuse their children. Lawyers abuse their children. Corporation owners abuse their children. Anybody can be an abuser, right? There's nothing that dictates what an abuser is. I mean, an abuser, a parent or caregiver or someone who would abuse a child, could be anybody. It's whoever chooses to abuse a child. That's an abuser. It doesn't have anything to do with, ethnic backgrounds, minorities, inner city families. It has nothing to do with it. Here's a myth. Most children are sexually abused by strangers. The fact is, estimated that approximately 85% of all child sexual abuses are perpetrated by an offender known to and trusted by the child. Only a small percentage of perpetrators fit the stereotype of the stranger. Now, this is a Canadian article, so that's very well the statistics up here. I do most of my studies revolve around this information that comes from the States. And the reason for it is because there's way more information from the United States than there is from Canada. Canada doesn't have a whole lot of information on child abuse. You can look around for it. There is some there. There's a few websites, you know what I mean? But the population up here in Canada is just not that large compared to the States. There's not very many people up here compared to the States. And so the percentages would change, right? But in the States, it's 90 to 95% of all child sexual abuse is perpetrated by an offender known to and trusted by the child. Whereas in Canada, in 2006, Hillingworth reported that it's estimated that approximately 85% of all child sexual abuse is perpetrated by an offender known to and trusted by the child. So that's the thing. And this person goes on to say only a small percentage of perpetrators fit the stereotype of the stranger. Yeah, and that's the whole issue. Like, a lot of people think that it's just stranger danger, and that's good to educate your children on stranger danger, because you want them to be safe when they're out, going to school, going to catch their bus, walking to and from their friends' homes or whatever they're out doing. You want them to be aware that they do have to be very careful out there. Stranger danger is an issue. But because most abuse is perpetrated within the home, in the United States it's about 90 to 95% for all abuse to happen in the home, because that's where the child is. The rest would be, wherever the child is, daycare, after-school programs, sporting events, like sporting, if your kids are into sports, after-school activities, any number of things that children do extracurricular outside of school, that, hobbies that they might have, this is, wherever your child is, that's where the abuse is going to happen. And since kids are, they're generally at home, quite a bit of the time, unless they're at a sitter's. So then it can happen when children are being babysat. This is the problem. Abuse happens where the kids are. So who are the abusers? Well, parents, caregivers, relatives, siblings, close relatives, distant relatives, doesn't matter. Babysitters, daycare workers, coaches, teachers, lawyers, doctors, anybody who gets a hold of a child, right? Child sexual predators, who could be your neighbors. You wouldn't even know if you don't check your sexual registries, you know what I mean? The child sex offender registries, right? So important for people to know that, anyone can abuse a child, anyone who chooses to abuse a child, right? Very sad, very pathetic that people are so sick and twisted that they think it's okay to do something like this to a child. But parents are murdering and killing their children every day. Parents are raping their children and sexually using them every day, beating on them, sending them to the hospital with abuse-related injuries, shaking them. Shaken baby syndrome is a huge issue, and mainly it's parents doing that. The sad thing is most of the abuse is perpetrated by the parents, and there's lots and lots of material out there to actually support that. There's a few other relatives that do abuse children, and whoever's the caregivers, the caretakers of the child, right? And sometimes it's daycare workers and babysitters and people who get a hold of children, right? So it's just so important for people to know. You have to get the facts. It's better to be educated. It's no good to live in fear. And fear won't get you anywhere. People say, a little bit of fear will get you somewhere. No, a whole lot of education will get you a lot farther. You don't want to bring your children up in fear. I mean, that's no way to live. Even as adults, we don't want to live in fear. But you know what? Educate yourself on how to keep yourself safe, and educate yourself on how to keep your family safe and your children safe, and that will go a lot farther, right? It's so important. Another myth is that most of the time girls are victims of abuse, and the fact is that both males and females can be victims of abuse. According to the statistics from Health Canada, boys are at the greatest risk of being abused between the ages of 3 to 7 years, and for girls it is between the ages of 9 to 15. So, that's just something, that's a strange idea, that somebody would think that almost always, or most of the time, girls are victims of abuse, because that's not true. Boys and girls are both victims of abuse, and of all the different types of abuse. Whether it's physical, verbal, emotional, psychological abuse, child sexual abuse, or neglect. Right? Boys and girls are subject, to all of that. Doesn't matter whether a boy or a girl. Right? It's so sad, and a lot of people think that it is just girls that are abused, and that's really a myth. It's not a fact at all, and it's so sad to see just how many people have been abused. I know a lot of survivors, and I because of the work that I do, and in contact with all kinds of advocates out there who are survivors, and I've known so many survivors in my lifetime who were abused as children, and growing up I knew a lot of kids who were abused as children. It's horrific what people do to children. And I wrote a book, and I wrote a blog, actually. It was called Not So Fond Memories, Growing Up in an Abusive Home. And Donna Shear saw the blog, and she's the president of Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. And I was volunteering with Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and this was last October, so it's over a year ago now. And I was writing a blog, and I wrote about that. I wanted to really just be as honest, and tell the whole truth about the whole thing, and even include the fact that growing up I knew other kids who had been abused, and that so many people in my lifetime, I've seen so much abuse, and it's just horrible. It is such an epidemic, and it's a real problem. We really have to change this. We really do, because no child deserves to be abused ever, right? There's another myth. Child abusers are easy to identify. And the fact is that child abusers cannot be distinguished from others. They are not only adults with mental illness or mental retardation, which, that's what they said in this article here. There's other words for that, developmentally, delayed and people who have mental illness, it's a myth, what I mean? That people would say that, just only people who are mentally ill abuse their children, or people who have, I forget what they call that. They don't use the word retardation anymore. That's an old word, and they have another word that's a lot more respectful. And I actually used to know it, but I can't. I'm just tired tonight, so I can't pull it up off the top of my head. But anyway, people who are just having problems, and they would think that people who have any kind of mental, handicap or whatever, are the only ones who abuse children, and that's just not true, right? So, in fact, many offenders appear to be upstanding citizens. And when you actually look at the articles and you actually see some of the child abuse headlines out there, which, we do look at them, and I'm always looking at them because I want to remember these kids, you know what I mean? They certainly deserved so much better. And, these poor kids out here tonight who we won't be able to get to in time, who will lose their lives at the hands of their parents and caregivers and other sick individuals who take their lives. You look at their pictures in the newspaper, because it's all public information, right? And you can see these people, and it could be your neighbor, it could be your family doctor, it could be the person who works at the grocery store. These people are just like everybody else, you know what I mean? Except for they choose to hurt children or kill children, and that's horrible. So you can't pick abusers out of a crowd. You really can't. Myth. Most children who are abused do something to cause the abuse to occur. So that's a myth, that people think that children caused the abuse to happen, right? The fact is the child is always the victim. The responsibility for the abuse lies only with the adult, right? In the case of child sexual abuse, many offenders try to shift the blame for their actions by accusing the child of being seductive or promiscuous. And this, we know, we study this stuff, so we know. And so it's absolutely ridiculous that people would think that children do something to cause the abuse or they deserve the abuse or whatever. No child deserves to be abused ever, because the adult in the situation, it's up to them to make the right decision. Children can't obviously do that because they're children. The parent, the adult in the situation, the caregiver, whoever the adult is in the situation who abuses a child, should have been able to make the proper decision and not hurt the child, and just properly, if you want to say discipline, or properly handle the situation, and not abuse them. And in the case of child sexual abuse, how can a child know anything about being seductive or promiscuous? You know what I mean? They don't, unless they're watching pornographic images and stuff like that, they wouldn't know about that stuff anyway. And children are innocent until their innocence is stolen. You know what I mean? And so, so many child sexual predators and pedophiles and whatnot who actually are convicted and found guilty of abusing children sit there and say, well, the child, the little child wanted this. They wanted me to, to do this to them. And how could no child's going to want that. You know what I mean? Because children are not sex toys, and they are not responsible for initiating sexual contact. It's the adult in the situation who should know better, you know what I mean, and remove themselves from the situation before they hurt the child, right? And people would say, oh, child sexual abuse doesn't hurt a child. Well, talk to me. I'll tell you a little bit different. And so there you go. I don't care who doesn't like, what I have to say about child sexual abuse. It makes me sick to my stomach that there's people out there that back up abusers and child sexual predators, and they would back it up and they would say, oh, there's just no problem with child sexual abuse, and most people who have been sexually abused as children would not remember it, they wouldn't care, and it wouldn't have hurt them that badly, and they're fine. Yeah, sure, yeah, okay, whatever. You know what I mean? I know way too many victims and survivors of child sexual abuse. You know what I mean? I would call them survivors actually, and thrivers. I know so many people in my lifetime. I have known, and I do know now, so many. And we talk amongst ourselves, and they have their stories. Their stories are out there. They're public information. You can get a hold of it. Who beg to differ. We know different. It's very damaging to a child, and children are not sex toys, right? They're not for adult sexual pleasures. They are not to be exploited. They are not to be molested. They are not to be sexually used in any manner. They're not to be treated like that. And so there's a lot of sick individuals who are trying to make it, trying to lobby the government so that they can have adult-child sexual relationships. Well, they're a bunch of sick individuals, because adults should be having sex with adults, and children should be allowed to be children. And I'll just keep saying that, and I don't really care who doesn't like it, because whoever wouldn't like me saying that would be somebody who would be supporting child sexual abuse, and I do not support any abuse, period. And so that's why I say it on every show, and it's so very important for people to know that child sexual abuse is very, very wrong, and no child should ever be abused in any way, let alone especially sexually abused. Children should be allowed to be children, and they should not be molested and raped and sexually used in any way, or exploited, in any way, right? And I mean, we can't say that enough. And you know why? Because the stats are, and the facts are, that 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused under the age of 18 in some way, whether that's unwanted sexual touching, which I experienced, molestation, which I experienced, exploitation, not so much, and rape. You know what I mean? So that's the whole issue, right? No child should ever be sexually abused, and 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused in some way under the age of 18. You know what I mean? That's incredibly wrong. That is just, there is absolutely nothing okay about that. And for people to be lobbying the government, to say, oh, allow adult-child sexual relationships, that makes me sick to my stomach. And, it's like, why is society backing up child sexual predators? Because they're somebody's sons, they're somebody's daughters, they're somebody's wives, they're somebody's husbands. Child sexual abusers are sisters, brothers. Child sexual abusers are mothers and fathers. Child sexual abusers are grandparents, grandmas and grandpas. Child sexual abusers are aunts and uncles. Child sexual abusers are nephews, cousins. Child sexual abusers are neighbors. Child sexual abusers are teachers, doctors, lawyers. And this is why society backs up child sexual abusers. But the thing is that child sexual abusers are committing a crime, a very heinous crime. And so they need to be brought up on charges, and they need to do the time. And then they need to get some serious psychological treatments, you know what I mean? Some type of psychology. They need some type of brain rewiring or something, because there's no way anybody that can tell me with an honest, straight face that it's okay to do anything sexual to a child. How can anybody think that that is okay, right? There's a lot of sick people out there. And, for 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys to be abused sexually in some way under the age of 18 tells you just how many sick people there are out there. And so, I'm going to keep on talking, and I really don't care who doesn't like it, because it's incredibly wrong. And we need to, as a society, we need to put our foot down, and we need to say, no, this is wrong. And then learn the signs and symptoms of child sexual abuse. And if your child comes to you and they disclose the abuse, and they say, somebody's touching me, somebody's doing something to me, you better take it seriously as a parent, because children don't lie about that stuff. They did studies, and they wanted to find out just how many child sexual cases were being made up by children. And I think they found one case out of however many thousands, where this one girl, they actually did make it up. And the rest was all substantiated. And that's because doctors know what to look for. And, my gynecologist at the age of 20 knew that I had been sexually abused as a child. And so that just tells you something right there. You know what I mean? Because I didn't tell her I had been sexually abused. And she actually pointed it out to me, and she said, you were sexually abused as a child. So, see, people, they do know what to look for. These doctors, they know, right? And so that's the whole issue, right? It's very sick and twisted, and I hope that everybody will speak out against child abuse. Do whatever you can, within your own areas, your own local areas. Get involved locally with groups who are doing anything to help stop the cycle of abuse, right? And to help abused children. Do anything you can. You can help nationally, even if you don't want to help Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, which I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. Even if you don't want to get involved with us, get involved with somebody. You know what I mean? And get on board and be another voice, right? We got to speak out against this. We have to stand up for child rights and stand up for protection of children. We need to stand up for education and promote awareness regarding child abuse, signs and symptoms, how to report it. And we need to do all we can to change the laws, and we need to get the funding going where it needs to go, which is to the programs that are actually proven to work. But it will take all of us to do it. So I hope everybody will just do something. You know what I mean? And I know all the people listening to my shows pretty much are already advocates. So thank you so much for tuning in. And have a great night, everybody. I'll be back on the weekend and as well on Monday night. And Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, we have a guest coming on, Rachel Stoley. She's an author and a survivor, and she's going to be on the show 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I hope you will tune in for that. It's going to be a great show. And have a great night, everybody. Have a great weekend. And just keep looking out for the kids in your own life. Make sure they're not being abused. And look out for all the kids around you in your neighborhood and make sure they're not being abused. Do whatever you can to stop child abuse. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. We'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.